I get the phone call from the recruiter and they're like, congratulations, you landed the internship at Moss. And 10 seconds later, they're like, and it's in our solar department. And I'm like, what do you mean solar?
I mean, 2-3 years ago, solar was already booming.
Right.
Like it was already, yep, this is great. And then suddenly things have changed even more. And depending on the reports you read, we're talking like we might need to double our entire capacity in like 5 years.
We talk about where it is right now, and you're seeing the investments that are being made real time in the industry. And I mean, you want to talk exponential growth, the hockey stick, if you will. I mean, we're like barely at the cusp of it. What I think we can say for certain is in the next 5 to 10 years, there's going to be a lot of change. And I think how we manage that change, how we communicate that change, how we integrate others to believe in that change, that's where the differences are going to come into play. Let's do this thing.
Okay, that's how we're going to open. Alrighty then. Greetings and welcome to yet another Sounds of Solar podcast. I'm Christoph Bruin, your host today. Joining me are these fabulous two gentlemen right here. I'm going to let you guys introduce yourselves.
I'm Russell Hamilton. Welcome.
Alfredo Espinosa with Moss Construction. Super stoked to be here with you, gentlemen.
Wow, look at that. A couple of fine, strapping young lads here. Wonderful.
Friends of solar.
Yes, indeed. Well, So Alfredo, thanks for being on the show. Usually we start with a little, just a little casual talk. I have something. Here's this weekend. I did something.
What'd you do this weekend?
And I went to a alpine ski jumping thing.
Oh, wow.
And, like that giant
Yeah. Which
thing.
one?
It's the one at Bush Lake Highland.
Yeah.
Where
Highland.
we did the
thing.
thing.
Because there's one there and then there's one, east on 494. It's right off of 494.
That's the one. That's Highland. Bush Lake.
And then I'm thinking past the airport.
If
you go east past the airport, there's another one over there.
Yes, that's at Carver or by Carver, whatever.
Yeah.
So, you've probably seen this in like the Winter Olympics, right?
Is this like when you say alpine, like big jump?
Yeah.
Like skis are like...
Yeah, they're basically
French
flying
to your face.
Yeah.
Type.
Yeah.
Well, they're like reverse pizza-ing.
That's right.
Technically.
So the location they're talking about, I know that's where the local Olympians actually train and practice.
Yeah.
And stuff.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, it was called Fly Fest. It was at Bush Lake ski jump at Highland, and it was kind of just went there on a whim because, you see these things and they're like, hey, did they ever use that? And turns out they do. And the winning jump was 78 meters.
Oh my God.
Like, can you imagine? Like
You gotta convert that into
78
American
yards.
for me.
American.
78 yards.
Put it in the American conversion.
Put an American
machine.
conversion system.
a little less than a football field.
Yeah,
something like that.
Football field. Yeah.
Impressed.
So
right.
it was cool.
Nice.
They'd only do it once a year though, so you guys missed it. And
It's all right.
You guys should have came in.
Well, when you said you went there, I wasn't sure if you like put on skis.
Oh.
Since you went there.
I think I'm a little bit of an adrenaline junkie. I think
A little bit.
that's too much for me. You would do it though, right?
I don't know. I would go the way you went probably, at least at first.
Okay, so it was extremely cold. Then
Colder than today.
yeah, so okay, our friends here, Alfredo and then Mike, these guys flew in, and it was I think the feels like was negative 32.
So
Like you guys arrived, it's 10 a.m. It's negative 32.
Yes, from Fort Lauderdale, Florida.
Yeah,
And I'm like a Latin America kid.
Yep.
I mean, I was born just south of the equator, and then when we moved to our final destination, it was just north of the equator. And so, yes, this was a first for me, but beautiful place though. Wow.
Yeah.
So when you left this morning,
Hint of
what was the
sarcasm there.
temperature?
No, I mean it. It was just under 80 degrees. It was like 76 degrees when
Okay.
I left this morning. Maybe
So
78.
110 degree swing.
Oh yeah.
Wicked.
But you know what? No other place I'd rather be. And
Look at that.
It's been
Wow.
a long
I love
time
it.
coming.
Sat
And I
here.
really appreciate you all having us today.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you, Alfredo. Oh,
Yeah. Very excited for you to be on the show.
So there's a lot of fun to do out here in Minnesota.
Oh,
Check
yeah.
out the Alpine.
Well, this is we're at the let's say if we're talking in terms of riding the wave or ebb and flow, we're definitely at one end of the extreme right now, and then
Yeah.
you come back. Well, you guys were here in
So we were here.
August,
So
or-
yeah, in the last 10 months, I've experienced my first 2 trips to Minnesota.
Mhm.
Had a summer trip with you guys in June or July, which
Had
that
fun on
was-
the side by sides.
we had a lot
heard
of fun. Yes.
stories.
The way we like to do business, and we'll talk more about this, but it's sometimes business and pleasure go together hand in hand.
They go very well.
And so we had a lot of fun on the side by sides, and I'd never been to Minnesota in the wintertime, obviously, and so really neat views flying in. I mean, it's just an incredible place.
Yeah,
glad we get to enjoy it with you all.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah.
So Alfredo, this seems like a good segue. So Alfredo, you are Senior Vice President, Solar Pre-Construction at Moss, and how long have you been with Moss?
So that's a great question because I celebrate my 10 years this year, actually.
Wow.
So I started my career with Moss as an intern. I was studying construction management at the University of Florida.
Okay.
So I mentioned I was born south of the equator, right? So I was born in Venezuela. Family moved to Brazil for a few years, and then when I was 5 or 6, ended up in South Florida. And so I consider myself a native Floridian, and like every good native Floridian, and I'll say this to the camera: you go to the University of Florida. This is my spiel. But ended up at the University of Florida and studying construction management. And like any good construction student at UF, you want to go work for Moss, which was. At the time and still is the preeminent general contractor in Florida, building everything from high rises to schools to baseball stadiums.
Yeah, you talked about the ballpark earlier.
The ballpark, the Marlins ballpark, the Formula One track we just built.
Really?
And
So Russ, Russ and I are both racing junkies.
I saw the. We were talking a little bit about this.
The sprint car.
Yeah. And so we've done a lot of that work. A lot of work around sports entertainment. And so I joined the company because I was attracted to those types of really meaningful projects, right? Projects that make a big impact to the community, and never thought I'd end up where I am today, certainly. But it's been an incredible 10 years. I mean, 10 years that I look back at and full of a lot of really neat moments that have taken not only the business or us, but from a personal standpoint, have been very rewarding. And so, 10 years.
Gee dang.
What got you in college? Why construction management?
Oh man, that's an even better question.
We got time. We got time, buddy.
So I fell into it. Is really the truth of it. I was, we were talking at lunch about something different, but we made the comment. We said, you can never really connect the dots when you're looking forward. If I had known at that point in time what I was doing, I mean, I would have never really projected to where I am today. It would have been hard to visualize it. But my story is a little bit different. I started as a business major. I actually followed my girlfriend up to UF. Was my now wife. And I started as a business major. And when I started in classes, my first 2 years at the university, I basically got involved in everything I could that was outside of my academics. And so I was in student government. I got into a number of leadership organizations. I was a prominent member of my fraternity. And next thing I knew, before I knew it, I had just built a lot of relationships with faculty and members of the University of Florida community. And I'd met the folks at the Rinker School of Construction Management. And I was struggling at the time as a business major trying to figure out, okay, where does this really go from here? And when I met the folks in construction and I saw the work they were doing, and I met with the faculty and got a better idea of, okay, this is where this type of career can take me. That's really what was the sort of driving factor. And so, a lot of folks that study construction management or get into the industry, their families were in it, or they have some type of background in it. And for me, it was just sort of serendipity, and it was the best thing that could have ever happened.
Nice. Give a little bit of a journey, the 10 years at Moss, from intern to senior vice president.
So, I'm at the University of Florida, and I get this opportunity to intern for Moss, which at the time, I mean, we were building the tallest high rise in Miami, number of them. We were building the tallest high rises in Fort Lauderdale, and that's what I thought I wanted to do. And so I get this opportunity to intern with this great company, family owned, exactly where I want to work. My parents are still in South Florida. My wife's family is still in South Florida. And so I get this internship and I get the phone call from the recruiter and they're like, congratulations, you landed the internship at Moss.
Yeah.
And 10 seconds later, they're like, and it's in our solar department.
And, wah, wah, wah.
2015, right? And I'm like, what do you mean solar, right? And so I'm, here I am. I was first in my class in construction management. I'm thinking about all these mega projects I'm going to build. And I get this call, I get this gig at my dream company, and I'm thinking about solar, and I couldn't even envision what it was that they meant when they said solar.
What exactly am I supposed to do with
I'm
that?
thinking, I'm like, we had like thermal, solar thermal on our roof that was powering like our pool heater and that kind of stuff. And so this guy, Edwin Perkins, who I'd never heard of at the time, obviously. And so Edwin's, of course, our president at Moss.
Yep.
And he's been my leader and big mentor for the last 10 years. So he calls me back and he says, hey, look, I had a business minor. I had my business experience before switching into the construction program. And he's like, hey, we have a really neat opportunity here where, he had heard through the recruiters that I had an interest in sort of the business side of construction. And he's like, hey, there's this nascent industry that we happen to have. And at the time when he said we, there was like 16 salaried folks and maybe 30 plus or minus, on the jobs building these projects. He's like, we have this, what we think is a special sauce for the self-performed construction piece of how to build these projects. And at the time, he needed somebody to come in and help him as an intern, just sort of build up really what was a pre-construction department of one at the time, which was Edwin. And so, Moss is a construction company, we're builders. And at the core of our DNA, that's really what we do. We're really good at, if you think about the EPC space, we're really good at the C is really sort of where we came from is the core of our DNA. And over time, we've organically grown and strategically grown towards being an E and a P. And so he said, hey, we have this opportunity. This is 2015 at the time. We're doing a lot of C for other EPCs in the space. And this was mostly the big module manufacturers, the SunPowers of the world back in the day, right? That were really, at the time, they were the largest IPPs. They were the largest EPCs. And they were building a lot of these projects. And we had like a lot of what Moss does. We'd built some really strategic partnerships in helping some of these folks solve for how they're building these projects. And so the long story short is I get this call and he's like, hey, there's this really neat opportunity for you to make a big difference here and for us to make a big difference here. And not only in your career, but in this industry. Because, at the time, nobody or very few folks knew of Moss in the solar space, right? We were sort of flying under the radar, doing a lot of C work for other EPCs. And so I got my start, really, the first gig was coming to do estimates for Edwin Perkins and seeing what we could do to take the model that the team had built around the construction of the EPC work and seeing, okay, what it would look like if we were try to scale this strategically. Both geographically and from a owner's perspective, and what would it look like if we were to grow this thing? And so we probably energized in 2015. We probably energized about anywhere from 50 to 70 megawatts that year, and that was a big year for us in 2015.
One small project in 2025.
That's exactly right. And so it's funny to think about. I mean, that was really the transition to solar, but 10 years later, we're sitting here, working with some incredible partners, and we've energized. I mean, last year alone, we energized 3.7 gigawatts across the country.
Yeah,
it's wild.
And so I'm doing a little bit of the weave here on you, and I apologize.
No, you're good.
That's really what drove the start of my solar career was wanting to go work for Moss, wanting to go work for the Moss family, the Moss people, and getting this opportunity of a lifetime and getting that call from Edwin Perkins that changed my life and said, hey, you get the chance to make a big difference here. And so that was the start of our pre-construction department, which was a pre-construction department of two, and has since grown and developed in a number of ways, including taking on the engineering management work, right? We went from being just a C to 10 years later, really a full EPC. And being really intentional about the folks that we work with and how we do that work. But yeah, it's been a really neat 10 years.
Sure.
So you mentioned obviously Edwin is a big mentor of yours, and over the last 10 years, are there any other people within solar or even just in general that have kind of been inspiring on this journey from there to now, or from then till now?
Yeah, there are so many, and they come in various forms and shapes and sizes, and like seriously, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's there's key folks that come to mind. I mean, Edwin's a huge part of it has been a huge part of my career and a lot of folks' careers at Moss. But it starts even, if you were to be interviewing Edwin right now, he'd probably be talking about Scott Moss.
Mm-hmm.
And if you were to interview Scott Moss, he'd be talking about Bob Moss.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've been really fortunate, right? Because we're in this energy industry and we're in the construction industry, these are tough industries, right? I mean, you're literally keeping the lights on. You're bringing power to the people, right? And so to us and to me, the biggest influencing factor in my career has been learning from guys and gals like Edwin and Scott Moss. So I'll call on Scott here, about not only the work that we do, but how you go about that work. And this is something like, non-scripted here, right? Like Moss and EVS, we spend a lot of time talking about partnership. And we do that upstream and downstream. We talk about what it really means to be a partner, and not only what you do, but how you do it.
Yeah.
And how you make people feel when you walk into a room, and how people really get inspired to take action in a positive direction when they leave conversations with you. And so, there's a number of factors that come to mind, but when I think about somebody like Scott, there's the professional aspects of, okay, this is how we're going to do what we're going to do, which is we're going to do it with integrity, right? We're going to honor relationships, which is one of our core values. We're going to care about the safety, well-being, and health of our employees. And those aren't just words on the wall. Like, the Moss family walks the walk. And so we in turn walk that walk too, right? They give us the opportunity to do that. And so being able to learn and sort of build a career around that environment where it's not only okay, but it's encouraged and it's expected to do the right thing. Like, there is no other option but to operate with integrity. There's no other option but to operate doing the right thing. And so that has been a huge influencing factor in my career. Outside of the big ones, I think about all my different experiences. I cut my teeth on a job site in 2016. That was my first sort of boots on ground experience in the middle of nowhere, Arizona. And then it was Nevada, right? And then before I knew it, I was sort of back in the home office. But I think about my old friends on those projects, and the construction manager who had the goatee.
Yes. Yes.
I don't know if
Russ is going to get one of those.
I don't know if I could name drop, but Tim Levitt, if you're out there, I mean, it's these people who, you spend maybe certain amounts of time with, and it doesn't have to be, I've known Scott and Edwin over the last 10 years. But guys like Tim, or folks that we've been around with, who you spend sort of months or you work on projects with, and they leave you with this legacy or this impact of like, okay, this is how I'm going to operate. This is how I'm going to operate. What I learned from Tim was, this is how I'm going to operate under pressure.
Yeah.
That was a tough job that we were on. And so it's too many to count, but a lot of influencing figures without a doubt.
Right on.
We wouldn't be here if it weren't for those folks, right?
Yeah, I mean,
what do you guys think?
I mean, exactly. Yeah, if I have to think back to all the people that had a good positive impact on me, or maybe sometimes even a negative impact of like, this is what not to do.
Oh my gosh.
And you mentioned the relationships aspect and integrity, humility. Obviously, these are core values that we share at both organizations. And I think that was in my past career, it's a lot of like what was missing, and a lot of that was missing. And it's like, once you find that, and if that's what your focus is in an organization, everything else is easier. It's like when you live remember, everyone's probably, you're a kid or whatever, and you tell a little white lie, right? And how hard is it to maintain that, right? As you move forward, you can't. So it's just like, imagine trying to do that in your business career. And it's like, if you take care of everything the right way with respect, humility, integrity, and everything else just falls into place so much easier. So
that's exactly right. And I think that's how you end up, we talk a lot about building organizations, right? I mean, if, we've done a lot of really neat work in the industry. And I think the thing that we've had to focus on the most, or one of the things that, I know I spend a lot of my time on is, and we do from a leadership perspective, is building out the organization, right? And, Chris, you talked about, a little bit about your background or what drives you to be at a place like EVS. And one of the things I love, I mean, we did it today when we were walking around your offices, and it makes me feel it's how I feel when I'm at Moss, right? It's, you look at the amount of tenure of folks that are at these organizations, and you look at how inspired they are to do the work that they're doing. And they're proud to tell you like, hey, I've been at this place and I've been at that place. And at the end of the day, this is where I want to be.
Yeah.
Because not only do you talk the talk, but you walk the walk, and you don't just do it internally, but you treat everybody outside these four walls that same way too.
Yeah.
And that's what goes. I mean, that's what, hands down makes the biggest difference. Right. And so you do enough of that and you build a track record around saying what you're going to do and doing what you say you're going to do. And you're right, Chris, the rest of it sort of starts to fall in its place when you do good work that way. Around people you trust, because that's the environment that you've built out.
It's that simple.
I think it's interesting that you bring that up. I've been around the block, a lot of different companies, a lot of different teams, and the studies team, I've been here almost 4 years, and
that's a long time in EVS terms.
It is a long time in EVS terms.
We've been growing a lot,
and like
especially recently,
the
last couple of years.
But like every year, we project to lose a certain number of people, right? We've lost 2 people in 4 years, and it just blows my mind that the team has still just stayed together.
Oh, it's wonderful.
It's just it blows my mind. It's just something else.
We talk about it a lot. On our side, we have our home office staff, you will, right? These are professional engineers, or they're estimators, or they're procurement folks, supply chain folks. And then you've got our thousands of men and women on these projects that are wearing hard hats and construction boots, and like they're the magic behind this work that we do. And this reminds me of a story. Like the biggest compliment we get about our business or the organization that we lead up is when mothers or fathers or family members are eager and excited to get their family members to come work on the team. Right. And so, much like you guys, not only do we see this, okay, there's a lack of attrition because you're doing things the right way, but, there's a woman, we love Bertha in Florida, and she's got, I think Bertha's probably on her like 12th or 13th Moss project at this point in time, but she's got like 3 of her sons, nieces and nephews.
Awesome.
Right. And so you go on these job sites and it's like the entire family.
Yeah.
And we have quite a few of those. Right.
Yeah.
And so we're really proud of that work that we do, because at the end of the day, what you do when you do that is you're not only just making meaningful impacts to the industry that we're in, but you're making at times, and we do a lot of this because of the areas in which we do work, you're making significant impacts, arguably at times generational differences and impacts to folks across the country. A lot of the work that we do, we parachute into a rural area, and you guys know this.
Wait, is it actually you parachute in there? Or?
If we could, if we could get there.
I mean,
that way.
yeah.
Sometimes it feels that way.
Would you do that?
I would 100% do that.
I feel like you would. Russ?
Yeah.
Would you do it with me,
I'm planning to do it this spring. Let's go.
I don't know.
I'm down.
Just don't tell me when we're jumping.
Yeah.
Oh, let's do it.
I'll
be the first
100%
one.
down.
Just don't tell my wife when we're jumping.
Right.
Until after.
This is a different kind of business trip. It's not the skydiving one.
That's awesome.
Team building. Trust. Trust.
You got to do it, right?
Trust fall.
Whoa.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it is. Sometimes it feels like we parachute in.
Because these sites are it's never like the suburban site or something.
No,
it's in the middle of nowhere.
They're often in remote areas that, some of them are near prominent metropolitan areas, let's say, but a lot of them are in rural areas that haven't had a lot of economic impact hit those areas in a long time. And so we really do get the opportunity to go in there and not only build the projects that we need to and make the differences and the contributions to the industry that we're making, but really make the impacts at a local level.
Yeah.
And not only do we hire these folks, but, some of the things that we're most proud of is, we were the first EPC to launch an apprenticeship program focused on solar installation. We launched it out of Florida in 2021 before Build Back Better was even a thing, right? Before any of that sort of became prominent talk around apprenticeship programs. We acknowledge this need to parachute into some of these areas that haven't otherwise had that traditional form of development and take folks that might be working different jobs or at times not even working at all and build careers with them. And so we enroll them into our training program. We enroll them in as apprentices. And we've got so many success stories of folks that started at Moss as an hourly worker, let's say, doing torque tube installations on a project in Arkansas. And now they're a head superintendent in Arizona with their entire family traveling with us. And these folks are going from, hey, this is my new job to, hey, this is my new career.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's something we're very, very proud of.
Right. And I suppose, it's kind of contagious because if you have an opportunity to step into a project like that, then you finally get an eye into what's actually happening in solar, and you see the growth that's happening and how exciting it is. It's got to be just life-changing. Right?
Absolutely. And I tell people this all the time. Like, folks have a perspective about solar and the work that we do, and who are the men and women that are building these projects. But I tell somebody all the time, I mean, we build a lot of stuff at Moss, right? We just wrapped up a St. Regis Hotel in Longboat Key. We built some of the big projects we've talked about, earlier today. And you take our workers on, let's say, you take a worker from a high-rise project or a solar project or an underground utilities project, you name it. And you put those folks in a car together and you can't tell who's building solar, who's building the underground utility line, who's building the high rise. Because at the end of the day, they're human beings that are focused on taking care of their families, just like we all are. And so I go back to the Mosses, but Scott has proudly said, and you'll see this when you hang around Moss folks, our just cause as an organization, which I love to see all the Simon Sinek books around your offices. We're big Simon Sinek fans too. But when he talks about starting with why and playing an infinite game, which is a lot of what Simon Sinek does, in the infinite game, you ought to have a just cause, right? Your organization ought to have a real just cause. And, Moss's just cause is to improve the lives of those that we work with. And what's wild, I'll tell you, as somebody who's been with the company for 10 years and I started my career here, it's wild when you get to live it. At times, maybe it's like we drank the Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
But it's not just talking the talk, it's walking the walk, and the proof is in the pudding.
Yeah.
I think that's probably one of the reasons why we're the last of the large family-owned EPCs in the space. A lot of our competitors, and you see this in the market, right? There's consolidation or there's private equity or they're going public. And what are we interested in? And it's a lot of what I see here when I spend time with you and your team. It's how do we make this a rewarding place to work?
Yeah.
How do we make this a place where folks can make the contributions and the differences in the lives that they lead and the lives that they lead on behalf of others on a daily basis? And how do we build an environment and an ecosystem that fosters that? And so, people ask, we were talking about time at lunch today. Where do you spend your time?
Yeah.
I'm like, dude, that's where I spend my time.
So, Alfredo, one of the other things you do is you are involved in SEIA. And why don't you just tell us about, what does SEIA stand for, number one? And then what do you do there? What do they do?
Sure.
Tell our listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. And you guys have a great fan base, so it's important to speak to this to this audience. So SEIA is our trade association. It's from a solar and battery storage standpoint, especially. It's the Solar Energy Industry Association. It's an association of member companies that are in our industry, right? Folks, whether they be EPCs or manufacturers or IPPs, or they're in the finance space. And we're talking folks across, utility scale and C&I and residential aspects of our industry. It's an association that is designed to represent the best interest of what we as an industry are looking to accomplish when it comes to making sure that the right decisions are happening or the right information is out there relative to policy or from just an overall industry advocacy standpoint. It's funny, Moss's story in SEIA is really unique because those first, like I said, I've been at Moss for 10 years. And these first sort of 5 or 6 years, we were head down just building projects for developers or for IPPs that were, projects were making their way through the development life cycle. And we were doing what we do, which is, we're going to focus on our organization. We're going to focus on the communities that we're working in. We're going to focus on our partners. And before we knew it, this little sort of mom and pop solar startup within this general contracting construction management business, we were the number one solar contractor in the country before we knew it. And so what we realized was, when it came to something like SEIA, if our just cause is to really improve lives, and we have a philosophy or a perspective of how we're going to do that, our thought process was, okay, we need to get involved, and not just get involved, but get involved at the highest level. So we can help SEIA understand when it's going through its efforts, whether they be in Washington, D.C., or at the local Chamber of Commerce level, whatever it may be, helping that organization understand the work that we do and the men and the women that stand behind the work that we do. And so we went from very limited membership involvement to about almost 4 years ago now, 3.5 years ago, we reached out to Abby Hopper and we said, hey, Abby, she's the CEO of SEIA. And we said, hey, here's all the work that we're doing. Here's all the projects that we're doing. And not only do we want to get involved, but we want to get involved at the top level. We want to get involved at the board, and we want to do everything and anything we can to really preserve and continue to build on the great foundation that we get to sort of leverage now today, right? We'd been riding the wave for those first couple of years, and it was time for us to get to the helm and say, okay, if we're really going to be this significant of a player in the space, we have a lot of families we represent. We have a lot of families that we speak for, and a lot of communities that are behind us and we're behind them. And so we figured, what better voice to be at the table with SEIA than Moss. And so we joined the board in 2022. Since then, we've had a number of really neat opportunities with SEIA to make what we think are meaningful differences to the work that's happening from an advocacy standpoint and an education standpoint. And this is something we're really excited about. The United States is at a crossroads, and maybe crossroads isn't the right word, but there's a really neat opportunity right now to solve for an energy demand issue. And so how we go about that is going to be really important. And we think solar plays a big role. And so SEIA is our voice, right, for the industry in DC when it comes to, okay, what's the role that solar can play in the energy market?
Can you, and I'm not sure how much you can or can't share, but can you share some of the impacts that Moss has had at this level in this space?
It's a great question. I think the big thing has been, when you think about industries like ours, it's easy to think of a bunch of manufacturers getting together. And you hear this all the time, right? There's the National American Manufacturers Trade Alliance, right? You see the financial groups getting together. The banks sort of organically get together and they understand, okay, what does the banking industry need to be doing to solve for the demands and the requirements of the vision for where we need to take the energy landscape in the U.S. What you haven't historically seen is contractors come together. I mean, you guys have been in the engineering and construction industry for quite some time. Historically, contractors have had these sharp elbows where it's like, we don't want to be at the table with our competitors, right? We don't want to be at the table with folks that might, maybe we have a secret sauce that, and so, what's been really interesting is over the last couple of years is seeing that evolve and change at SEIA. And so I think the biggest impact that we've been able to make is, the manufacturer's voice was sort of consistent and engaged, and the IPPs were sort of consistent and engaged. What we've been able to do, much like the banks and those other folks, is bring that contractor's voice to the table. And it isn't just about policy. It isn't just about electrons, but it's about women like Bertha and her kids and the next intern who's going to start their career here and build their career here, the next hourly worker who's going to become a general superintendent in a number of years, and it's going to change the trajectory of their family's legacy, right? That's what we're doing, and I think that's what I'm most proud of. Is the biggest impact we've been able to make is bring an entirely different perspective to the table. And we think we're a big part of the solution, right? Like there's a lot of interesting things happening from a grid standpoint right now. We've got to put more generation on the grid. And so
it's a thing.
We are big part of the solution.
You guys are the ones who build it. You install the stuff. So
we like to say
got a pretty big voice, I would think.
When you're on a job site and you see the American worker building these plants, we are the we are the face that's reflected on the panel.
Yeah.
And so
wait, is that a pun or
I like that.
That's by, I don't know if you call that a pun. It's by design.
Is that
by
trademarked?
design? Is that a
By
pun?
design.
Yeah.
I feel like everything.
There's a lot of meta stuff happening here right now, or something. I don't know.
But yeah, no, I mean, like that's the biggest impact we've been able to make is bring that contractor's perspective.
Yeah.
I think one of the things, I really appreciate about you, Alfredo, is that people matter. And it's like very evident and not just this interview, but as I've been fortunate enough to get to know you the last few months, like I really appreciate that, how for you people really matter. And, recognizing that you're in a position to help a lot of people change their lives in a really positive way. Yeah. And in return, they'll do the same.
Yeah.
So I'm just really impressed. Yeah.
No, look, and feelings mutual. I get on my soapbox and say it.
Get on the soapbox.
We talked about the Moss family earlier, but it's something I see here when I'm with my friends at EVS. You guys have a Dennis, we have a Bob, right? Mm-hmm. You have an Andy, we have a Scott.
Yep.
And you've got this father and son's dynamic that, thanks to that, we are here doing what we're doing. And
yeah.
You want to talk about the American dream, like a guy like Dennis Kim coming to Minnesota with his family and accomplishing the things that he's
accomplished. 32 degrees.
Yeah, real cold. Yeah, Dennis, I don't know how you ended up here. We'll have to talk about that another day. No, I know. From what I hear, he likes the cold, and there's a lot of fun to do up here, a lot of good stuff. But yeah, people matter. And I think we are very fortunate, and I say we, the three of us, without a doubt, are very fortunate to work within the walls of these organizations that recognize the fact that people matter. Mm-hmm. People work for people, right? You can have everything else, but if you're not doing things the right way, those things aren't going to fall into place.
Exactly.
And so that's always been our MO is look, we're going to, like, when in doubt, do the right thing. And when it comes to people, always do the right thing.
Yeah.
And it amazes me. I mean, the amount of stories that we have or things that you could go into of, when did Moss or when did a company like EVS, like when did we go the extra mile to go help make a difference for somebody who, otherwise maybe wouldn't have had that opportunity. And so I think part of it, Russ, comes back to just recognizing the fact that I'm a product of that.
Yeah.
Like I am here today with you as a senior vice president because of the opportunities that my mentors like Edwin, guys like Mark Sahaki, who's his birthday today. He shares a birthday with Sohan too. Happy birthday, Mark. Happy birthday, Sohan. But these are folks that have made such a big difference in my life and my career that I have really no other path in my journey that I see but to give it back.
Right.
And, we talked about that small group of two in pre-construction. We're upwards of 70 folks under pre-construction, and that's estimating and engineering and early stage project management and business development. And then some of the work we do in government affairs and SEIA. And, the fact that I get to go home, we talked about where does our time go, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I owe it to those folks, and not just the 70 folks that fall under my umbrella, but, the projects the work that we do on the front end allows these projects to pencil and to get to fruition. And so, the idea that the work that we get to do on the front end makes it possible to make that difference in people's lives it's by far the biggest driver for me.
Nice. Like it.
So that's the here and now. What about looking forward in the future? So maybe talk a little bit about SEIA, but like what sort of challenges do you see coming up in the next, year, 2, 3, 4, 5? Like, what are you looking at as far as on the SEIA realm, maybe?
Yeah. So, I mean, look, SEIA, the best thing I can look at it is, SEIA from a trade association standpoint and the work that it does from a policy or let's say just government affairs standpoint. For us, really, the way we look at it is, I mean, we're excited because you have problems to solve for. Like you want to talk about a tailwind, like this demand for energy that's driven by data centers and artificial intelligence. Yeah. I mean, it's unheard of.
And we didn't even 2-3 years ago, solar was already booming.
Right.
Like it was already, this is great. And then suddenly things have changed even more. And depending on the reports you read, we're talking like we might need to double our entire capacity in 5 years.
Yeah, it's
yeah. What?
I mean, we talk about like the amount of energy that you could use to power like a metropolitan area of, let's say, Los Angeles, right? Like if you were to take, the amount of energy you could produce over a year to power that area. I mean, it's nothing relative to what you're going to need to power that same area once we have AI and these, like, we talk about where it is right now, and you're seeing the investments that are being made real time in the industry. And I mean, you want to talk exponential growth, the hockey stick, if you will. I mean, we're like barely at the cusp of it. And so where I go with this is, there's energy is always a policy driven industry, right? And so there's something we have to do from an industry and a business standpoint to keep a close eye and make sure that, we're aware of what's going on. And there's going to be all sorts of fun dynamics when you have a change in administration every 4 years, right? There's a lot of dynamics there and nuances. But you have to solve for this opportunity that is energy demand. And so, regardless of the administration, we have to put electrons on the grid, and folks understand that, right? I mean, even, amidst all the turbulence or volatility and, the solar coaster, right, if you will, we are very bullish, and there's a lot of tailwinds that are driving the industry to what should be very bullish about the work that we're doing. Now, policy plays a really important role. Yes. And so the reason we are spending the time and doing what we're doing is because, okay, where can it really make a difference is how much or to what extent can we bring in business certainty or certainty for businesses like ours to continue investing in the things that we're doing. And, from a Moss perspective, we're double down. We have been for the last couple of years. I mean, we just moved office spaces. We're getting more square footage. We're building, operational centers across the United States to service these projects. We're talking yards, we're talking iron, we're talking people. And so we're committed. And so, I think the biggest thing to look out for is, look, there's going to be dynamics at play, right? And we've lived it. It's this is really a bipartisan industry, if you will. We've had headwinds under some administrations and tailwinds under others, and vice versa. But this is greater, we think, than really sort of any single aspect of policy. This is about how can you solve for the energy demands of today and tomorrow. And frankly, you're going to need, I'll quote the administration, you're going to need an all of the above strategy. And solar plays a huge part of that because you want to talk about getting electrons on the grid ASAP. We built, you guys were a big part of these projects. We just commissioned 2 gigawatts of projects in Florida that were built in like 8 months. Yeah. Right. And so that's a Hoover Dam. We built a Hoover Dam in Florida in 8 months. And guess what? We can do that over and over and over again.
And we learned a lot on those ones that we can improve on the next ones. Exactly. And that was only 8 months. So let's do it again.
That's exactly right. Right. And so we are ready for whoever's watching this. We are ready to deploy gigawatts to the grid. You let us know when and where. But yeah, no, all jokes aside, this is, that's the way we look at it. Right. And so our focus when it comes to SEIA or when it comes to policy is bringing objectivity, showcasing the great work that Americans are doing across the country on these projects, and being realistic about the energy demands of tomorrow. We cannot lose to our friends in the East when it comes to what they're calling the arms race against China and AI. Right. And so that has a lot of folks' attention. And so, you don't see me wearing a tie-dye shirt and Birkenstocks, but I'm all about solar. Right. And we're going to get power to the grid by doing the work that we do.
I think we should wear our Birkies and tie-dye next time.
I wish I had Birkies.
Yeah, you should get some.
I'm not going to lie. I had Birkies back in the day.
I was going to say, I'm pretty sure.
What do you see the next 5-10 years in this solar industry? What do you see like improvements? Where do you see the direction going?
That is not even the $1 million question. That might be the $1 billion question.
We just talked about you can't connect the dots.
No, I know, but
what
do you? But I mean, like AI, right? You talk about AI. You talk about data centers.
That's so crazy. Like I say, like we didn't even know
Yeah.
Like 2 or 3
It's
years ago,
hard
ChatGPT, like just
Okay, so
oh, I guess this is a thing now.
And the ChatGPT thing's funny because I'm way in the tail end of that, and I finally like a month or so ago downloaded it on my phone, and I'm like, holy shit!
Is it writing your emails yet?
Keep that.
I won't.
I'm not. I can't. I plead the fifth on that, but it's really impressive. I'll go in there and just say like, this is what I want to say.
It's kind of a
make it sound better.
It's kind of a slow burn of like, oh, okay, this is kind of fun. Because I remember when the image generators came out,
the image one's good too.
It's kind of fun, and then
like,
oh, maybe I can do something useful with this. And especially like ChatGPT is just crazy for just offloading tasks, you know, and like things like like writing a memo. I wrote a memo the other day, and like I wrote it in my voice, and I was like, oh, this is fine. I'm like, maybe what happens if I just like have someone else proofread it, namely a AI computer.
Yeah.
And it's cool. And then what I did after is I said, oh, this is perfect. Now redo it and make it the most technically jargon laden, needlessly complex thing ever. And it did it perfectly. Yeah. And it was like, that's fun.
You know what I really use it. I haven't used it for this yet. I know some folks who do. I'm excited to. Is we're engineers.
Yeah.
So writing is not our forte. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so
you said that, not me.
Yeah, but it's true. It's true. So I have a lot of reviews that I have to do for internal. So it's nice to like, I've heard people use like, they put in what it is that they want to talk about, how to like most efficiently provide feedback.
Yeah.
Oh,
and it just, it really helps because we struggle with that sometimes as engineers of like, how do we provide feedback in a way that's constructive and it's going to get the person to understand what you're trying to explain to them so they can improve.
Especially when you describe as your, so I have a ChatGPT helper.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, I felt like I came in late too. And I've learned a lot and it's incredible. I mean, my model has, or brain, ChatGPT, my friend, has learned me. Right?
Yes.
And so I've given it enough information to where it knows how I write, to an extent, some of the things that I think about when I'm communicating with certain people. And then you educate it on who your audience is. Mm-hmm. And so you say, hey, I'm Russ. It knows Russ at this point in time. And I have this team member, who this is a little bit about them. This is how many years out of school they are. This is where their focus areas are. This is what I'm having a hard time with. And piecing some of those things together, it's wild. Mm-hmm. It's absolutely wild. But you're spot on, right? Like, okay, where are we going to be 5 years from now?
I don't know.
I mean, it's incredibly difficult.
Can we have flying cars?
Right? I mean,
they already exist. There's already electric vertical takeoff and landing vehicles. They're already here.
Look, the future's bright, right? Like the amount of technology innovation that's happening right now is insane. But I hate to keep. It's easy for me to bring this back to people, right? Yeah. But it's really where it goes to, because what I think we can say for certain is in the next 5 to 10 years, there's going to be a lot of change. And I think how we manage that change, how we communicate that change, how we integrate others to believe in that change. And that's where the differences are going to come into play. I mean, look, technology is going to be a significant part of it. We at Moss, we're builders, right? Mm-hmm. We happen to be the best at building these renewable energy projects. We happen to be the best at building the work that we're doing in solar and battery storage. But we believe that there will be evolutions to technology. Mm-hmm. And so, our job or our philosophy is, okay, let's make sure that we continue to work with and engage with the best and brightest to stay ahead of these curves, right? And so it's from a technology standpoint, I mean, it'll be really interesting to say. I get a lot of questions around automation or what that looks like. And, it'll be interesting to see how some of these test cases shake out. There's a lot of excitement out there, and there's some products that we look forward to seeing sort of develop or implemented. But we still see people as a key part of the element, the human element as a key part of the puzzle when it comes to solving for these future technological advancements. And so, people think of automation and they think about full robotics, but they don't think about that first sort of hybrid step of like, okay, what does like soft automation look like?
Sure.
Right. Before you had machines building everything, you had machines helping humans build stuff. Right. And so, when you're doing a 3,500 acre solar project in the middle of Texas, it's not a factory floor. What does that look like for robotics? There's inherent headwinds relative to what it looks like for automation in that space. But when you combine technology with the human element under the right philosophy and framework, I think that's where we're going to make the biggest difference. And that's really what's been a big focus of ours. But yeah, it'll be really interesting. There's a lot of exciting things we're seeing. We're working with your teams on one of the biggest, if not the biggest, solar project in North America. I think we'll be able to plant our flag on that, which will be neat.
Yes. And that's one that actually Chris and I are both working on.
Oh, that's awesome. You guys are both on the project together? Okay.
Yeah. We got the A-team on that one.
There we go. Heck yeah. You see me just lay back and get chilled. Now I feel a lot more comfortable knowing who's on it. Yeah.
Got me.
Yeah. So yeah, no, man, that's really exciting, right? So we're building these big projects, and these are jobs that are going to be, that job will probably finish, it's phased, right? But 27, 28, 29, right? And so we have a little bit of visibility, but that project has DC coupled battery storage, right? Which is, we've talked a lot about battery storage. We've seen a lot of AC coupled, right? But it's really neat to see some big projects with, something like DC coupled storage and having to solve for that together. So we're really excited about some of those things, right? There's a lot of talk, obviously, around batteries, and then repowering is the other one. Are
you guys seeing repowering starting to come into play? I mean, you've been in the industry for 10 years.
Yeah, it's got to be, coming up at some point.
We've been talking about it for a while. It's been talked about for a long time. We're finally starting to see a little bit of traction. And I think some of the big folks are starting to recognize maybe the opportunities that come into play with repowering.
Well, it's like, is it part of it? I mean, is the big part, like, I guess when you do new modules, like, you kind of need the same form factor, right, to make everything work more or less. But like modules have changed so much. Like we're going from like 350 to like now they're like 700.
Yeah.
Like it's just it's crazy.
And typically in like a smaller package even.
Yeah.
Compared to what it was back.
But
then.
have they degraded that much? Or
no. So here's really what it comes to is the technology has changed that much.
Yeah.
So there might be nothing wrong with the panels, but I think about, so been at Moss for 10 years, first 5 or 6 years, we're doing a lot of the C work for other EPCs. And then 2019, 2020, towards where we are today, really the last 5 years is where our business, we some of the strategic partnerships that we'd really focused on came to fruition the way we wanted them to. And there's projects we built in 2019, 2020 that are great projects in our backyards, producing exactly how they need to be producing. And they're using 350 watt modules.
Yeah. Yep.
And so to your point, right, if that project has, every PPA is a little bit different, but a lot of these projects have the opportunity for expansion.
Yeah.
Right. Like if you're the owner of that asset, you may say, okay, I don't need to change the panels. But if I do, can I get a little bit more out of this power purchase agreement?
Yeah.
And can I bring more energy to the grid? Back to what we were getting at, right? Like, what are we all doing this for? Is we're going to go solve for that problem. And so it allows you to do both. Those panels, if you think about, if I take my Moss hat off and my industry hat on, or just big picture, those are panels that can then go somewhere else.
Exactly.
Too, right. They can go to secondary markets outside of the US or, so it's, good products that can be put to use, but there's just an opportunity to get a little bit more squeeze here if folks do this right. And so that'll be really interesting to see. I think we'll see a little bit of this stuff happening, and what'll be really curious is to see, okay, to what extent does this really take off?
Right on.
And I think that's interesting too, because we've talked about this in the past on this show of like when plants get to their life, and then it's like there's going to be this new industry of recycling.
Yeah,
that's not currently here. You know what I mean? And it's going to be really exciting to see the economic impact of this huge new. I mean, I imagine it'll be huge. I mean, of all these 30 years, right? 25, 30 year plants. All of a sudden, you got to figure out what to do with all that material. It's going to be recycled. you know, it's going to
especially
be
these modules that are 6 years old.
Yeah.
Man, they're still perfectly good. You can take
well,
it
right.
to my
You
house.
could take,
I'll take
we got
20.
rooftops.
Yeah.
right. Yeah. You know, but it's an interesting like thought. So I brought this show up a few times. Landman. Have you seen Landman?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
My dad I talked to my dad last night. He just finished the first episode.
So good.
Dad, when you watch this,
So good.
Yeah, so good, right?
But there's this, what you were describing with like updating the modules, maybe think of when they, Landman's oil, right? Which is, but they're like, hey, we've got this well that's producing 10 barrels a day. If we shut it down and we rework it, it's going to cost us $10 million. All of a sudden they get it fixed and they're, 1,000 barrels a day.
Right.
That's what it kind of made me think
That's exactly, I mean, that is the problem statement.
Yeah.
That is often the problem statement. And so those are the conversations I think are being had right now. But yeah, it's a lot. What a great show, huh?
Such a good show. You've seen it then?
Yeah.
And we need to watch it.
Well, it's so good.
We got
to hate on solar a little bit. It's a little not quite accurate, but
yeah,
it's still a good show.
Listen, I'll tell you what. One, it's a good show. It's TV.
Yeah.
But two, it's a great representation of how an industry portrays itself, and how our friends in the oil and gas world look at themselves and the work that they do.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, it's an interesting show. It tells it's take everything with a grain of salt. Looking at the audience now,
yes, especially when you start dogging on renewables.
Yeah, but it's it's a very good show. And I'll tell you what, you went to. We were talking about decommissioning or sort of recycling of the panels, and one of the coolest things I think one of the coolest things I think about when it comes to the work that we do is we are helping farmers keep family land.
Yeah.
Right. And so you've got generations, second, third, fourth generations of farmers that, maybe the kids or the children are not as interested in doing the work that, mom and dad were doing, or allocating that land for the historical use that it was being used for. Or maybe the crops that they were growing are not as profitable as they were before, or they're having challenges with that land. And so one of the coolest things I think about is I get emails every week, info@mosscm.com. A lot of the leads will come to us from a business development standpoint. And it's farmers like in Texas, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Georgia, Tennessee. And they're emailing us every week. I get the email and it's like, hey, I've got 400 acres. What do I got to do to put solar on it? Hey, I've got 8. And I'm like, where are you when the city commission meeting comes? Because that's the perspective that we need is solar still has the potential and often is a cash crop.
Yeah.
Right.
And at the most fundamental basis of it, that is what it is, basically.
It's exactly right. And so you ask, okay, what do we do with these projects? What do you do with the land 25 to 30 years after we're done with it? Well, you get to choose. And the beauty of it is, if you want to bring that land back to what it was intentionally used for, you can do it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
These plants, these sites don't become brownfield sites.
Right.
No.
Right?
Yeah.
They don't, it's not like building a laundromat. And so that's 25 years in the grand scheme of the American history will go by pretty quick.
It goes by quick.
Yeah.
Right. And so if your idea, what you're concerned about is, okay, what am I doing with land from a legacy standpoint? Well, we can help you solve the energy needs of today without knowing where technology is going to take us in the future. And guess what? 25, 30 years from now, or even 20, right? Like if we all end up building small modular reactors and we get into nuclear together, right? Like those projects, because who knows, right? We're builders. You guys are engineers. Yeah. We just happen to be really good.
Almost figured out nuclear. Is it fission? Fission is the holy grail.
Well, you guys is a lot of people. It's not me. But
okay.
But no, look, the long story short of it is that it's if you think about it, right? We're builders. You guys are engineers. This is the work that we do today, and it's the work that we're really proud of. Who knows what the future brings? But what we do know is we think we have a really good philosophy of how you do what you're going to do, right? Just like you guys do. And so we want to be a part of it. But yeah, there's so many opportunities. And one of the best things for me is you can bring that land back that it was intended to be used for.
I want to touch on one thing I really like, and I brought this up before on the show, and you're in the same boat. We're in a position in this industry. We're on the leading edge of it.
Yeah.
We can really guide the solutions to these really big problems. We can be part of that solution. We can dictate where that solution's coming from, how it's being solved. And that's just one of the things I think is really unique. I came from an oil and gas background as an engineer. And, very old industry.
Right.
Things are the way they are.
There's not
room for innovation. There's not room for their issue now is, okay, we're not building these plants anymore. What do I do with these engineers who that's what they've done for the last 20-30 years?
Exactly. Russ, call your friends, man. Bring them here.
Yeah, no doubt, right? Yeah. But I just like I that's what was like what I look forward to is those challenges. I mean, they're challenges. They're not easy, right? And it's a lot of interpreting what's the correct way to do something.
Oh yeah.
But like I'm on a IEEE committee. That's how you do it. You get involved, you get on these committees, you try to make the positive impacts, guide the industry in the direction that's going to be the most efficient, the best, and it just sounds like I hear you talk and I hear a lot of the same thing. Moss is in a position to be on that leading edge of helping solve these problems and come up with the solutions. And
yeah, no, you hit the nail on the head. One of my favorite stories is actually, you asked me how I got involved in solar, but how did Moss get involved in solar, right? And so we got a call in 2009 from our local utility, friends just north of us, and they were building a 25 megawatt project. It was the largest.
Which was huge, right?
Yeah, man. This was the largest solar project east of California at the time.
Dang.
So large that President Obama came down to commission the plant. And this was the days of the module manufacturers being the EPC. And so we get this call and they're like, hey, can you come just look at this project? You guys do a lot of repetitive construction. Right? You build a 60-story high-rise in Miami and there's no lay-down yard, right? You don't have space for it. And so you talk about logistics and process and construction philosophy and methodology. And again, we're builders in the core of our DNA. And so we say, okay, for our local utility friends, we'll go up there and take a look. But the coolest part of that whole story for me is what you just described, which is an opportunity to solve problems. And so our Brad Wilson, who was the guy who created our self-perform construction operations at Moss, he's since somewhat retired, but he's our mad scientist, if you will. He's led our self-perform construction program for years, and he's an old hunter, riflesman, avid outdoorsman, and he's a welder by trade. He's just one of those MacGyver type guys. And so he gets out there and he sees that the contractor at the time, they're using string wiring for everything, right? And then they're literally just pulling string for Z elevation. And so Brad had a concrete background and they'd been using laser levelers and concrete since like the 80s, right? Yep. And so he's a builder. He gets out there and he's like, look, man, he sees what's going out there. And, that's before my time. So I'm hearing this story secondhand. And the first thing he does is he goes to the local Bass Pro Shop and he buys a Bushnell rifle scope. And I kid you not, he buys a couple Bushnell rifle scopes and some lasers. He goes back to his garage and he welds himself what becomes the industry's first laser alignment jig, which is still like the prominent way to just like align your Z elevation on piles to this day, right? And so it's exactly what you said. And that's one story that we're proud of, which is, look, you go to almost any solar project in North America today and you see laser alignment jigs. And we know that stemmed from an afternoon in 2009 where Brad Wilson decided to go to the Bass Pro Shop to solve that problem.
Yeah.
And that's what got me in this industry when Edwin Perkins called me that day and said, hey, you got the opportunity to be a part of this nascent industry. Man, what a really neat moment in time to get out there and solve for some really unique problems.
Yeah.
And some opportunities for solutions. And so we've done that. We've done just that. We've figured out how to scale our operations, how to invest in our talent, how to work with great partners across the board that not only do what we do, but believe in the way that we do it. And so it's a big part of why we're here.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Alfredo, we've got time for one more question on the Sounds of Solar podcast.
Getting the hook.
This is the tough one. It's the softball question. So we asked this to all of our guests. If you were to give one piece of advice to a new professional in renewable energy in the solar industry, whether it's someone coming fresh out of school or someone with a seasoned tenure of work experience, what would that piece of advice be?
That is another great question. And I appreciate it as the last question. again, it reminds me of what I said earlier, which is I'm the product of good advice, right? Like you have a lot of mentors and a lot of folks that are around you, if you're fortunate, like I've been in your life, to give you perspective and help shape you into who you are. And if I think back on my time, and if I think about any advice I'd share with somebody who's either coming into the industry or fresh out of school, or not even out of school, just coming into the industry to start your job for the first time, is, and I tell this to all of our interns when they start every summer, is I say, go chase the exposure. Go find the opportunities where you're going to learn something different. I almost turned this opportunity down because I was like, what's solar? Mm-hmm. Right? I kid you not. If Edwin hadn't called me that afternoon, my life would be entirely different. Mm-hmm. And even when I got into solar, I was like, okay, I want to be the business guy in solar. The first thing Edwin and Mark did was they said, okay, you want to be the business guy in solar? You're going to go out to Nevada and Arizona, where we start work at 4 a.m. Mm-hmm. And we're working 7/12s to get this project done and get out of the heat. And, it wasn't about the financial compensation, right? It wasn't about what this 1 to 2 year experience would look like on my resume. It was this opportunity to go learn something different and be exposed to something new that who knows how I would use that in the future. Again, you can only connect a lot of dots looking back. But I can't tell you how valuable that opportunity was for me. Like that was one of the best things that could have ever happened in my career, was spending that time out there. And so I tell everybody, I say, look, you see that conference room that might have an interesting meeting, like peek your head in the window or the door and ask if you can join. The worst thing that can happen is somebody says no.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
There you go.
Or like you see your supervisor or your manager and they're working on a contract negotiation and it's like 6 o'clock and you're about to leave. What happens if you just ask that person, like, hey, can I just see what you're working on? Can you teach me, or can I help you? Can I sit at the table with you? And I had the pleasure of doing that. Like I had the opportunity to do that. We were a small team, and so I was exposed to a lot. We joke, we call it caddying for people sometimes. Like take the opportunity to go caddy for somebody who really knows what they're doing, and sit at the table with them and go grab lunch with them and chase the exposure. And I believe it. My philosophy is if you chase the exposure and you chase the experience, when I say exposure, it's really experience, right? And you chase those opportunities, everything else falls into place, right? The financial rewards come, the career comes, the titles come. Like, don't chase the title. Don't chase X, Y, or Z that's like materialistic or compensation driven. Go find the experience that's going to be most rewarding to you. And when you go find that experience and you're in your swim lane and you're grooving, that's when the magic happens. And I think that's how you find yourself, and that's how we find ourselves into situations like we are in today, where I get to be here with these two incredible people
on the Sounds of Solar podcast.
Sounds of Solar.
My stick is I always try to give out some swag for our guests, so I got you a couple things here for you to.
Oh my gosh!
It's branded EVS merchandise.
Bamboo pizza cutter.
Hell yeah.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
Big pizza fan. And JBL, babe, I'm sorry. More music, loud music. We love to play music, guys. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
You really. Yeah. We get to see a lot of folks in this industry. We spend a lot of time with people, but and I say this off the mic all the time to you guys. But when I walk through this office and I see you guys and I see your team members, there's few companies that I think are so like ours in terms of the family dynamics and how you operate. And so what an absolute pleasure. I hope we did right by you guys today. We're 100%. Real proud of this podcast.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
And so thank you to everybody who's been a part of it.
Thank you. Thank you for
Jordan.
Being on here.
Thank you, Alex. Yeah. Absolute pleasure.
Thank you for coming. Appreciate it.
Wonderful. Well, that's going to do it for us on the Sounds of Solar podcast today. Do the thing, click all the buttons that appear on the screen at this time. You know what that means. So we'll see you next time on the Sounds of Solar podcast.
Peace.